Buckle up for AEC Trailblazers, The Founders Files, where we crack open the stories of the brightest minds in the AEC startup scene. Forget institutional pitches. We're diving deep into the real personal journeys of these industry disruptors. Get ready for some casual chats firsthand.
Hello. Welcome everybody to the Trailblazers podcast, where we interview amazing people from the tech industry of the AEC. Today here with us we have Anthony. Really amazing bio, Anthony. You want to say hi?
Hi. How's everybody doing?
Let me tell you a little bit about Anthony. With executive experience and over 30 years as a veteran in the AEC industry. Sorry for the word veteran, Anthony. He's passionate about improving the built environment through better tools for architectural design, engineering, construction, and facility operations. Mm-hmm. Anthony spent over 10 years at Autodesk, working his way up from manager of Revit product lines to director of product strategy and product management. In 2018, Anthony transitioned to entrepreneurship. Hypar has been his latest venture. Is a design automation platform for buildings where he serves as a COO. Beyond his professional pursuits, Anthony defines himself as a chef, caterer, and all-around food nerd. And also, he has been helping to found and manage a nonprofit art gallery in North Burlington, Vermont for about 10 years. So many interesting topics, Anthony.
Where do you want to
start? Yeah, food. Can we start with food?
I guess I started to really pay attention when I lived in Los Angeles for a couple of years in the early 90s, because having come from New England and having had paradoxically a rather parochial upbringing in New York, to kind of encounter a lot of different cuisines in Los Angeles was kind of eye-opening. And of course, this was right at the beginning of fusion food, etc. And so I just got very interested, and also not for nothing, I was seeing at the time somebody who was also a very good cook. So you start to gravitate around that.
What's your favorite? Like, if you have to prepare a dish, what's your favorite dish?
It would have to be something from Mexico. I have a great love for chimichangas.
That's a good one. And also tell me, how do you ended up, I didn't know that you were helping with an art gallery, a nonprofit. How do you ended up doing that?
So I went to Bennington College, and after I returned from Los Angeles in about, I think, 92. And I had graduated with a degree in architecture and sculpture. So when I came back, some college friends of mine were putting on this show in an empty factory space, of which, there's kind of a lot in New England, especially at the time in the recession of the early 90s. And you don't have a lot of competition in a small town in Vermont for doing events. And so there was an opening, and it was very well attended. And, three of us were there in our kind of sweaty t-shirts and, jeans, having just spent several days preparing the gallery. And someone comes up to us and says, "Oh, this is great. How do I show in this space?" And the three of us kind of looked at each other, and we said, "I don't know. Yeah, I guess you talk to us." And so we did a show the next month with this person. And then every gallery opening, more artists would come up to us and say, "How can I show here?" And eventually we had monthly shows booked out for 2 years in advance. And finally, another friend of ours who got involved later said, "We really should try to run this place on grants rather than whoever has money that month, because we always used to throw in $50 into the kitty to buy 3 more lights." So it was kind of it was a real sort of grassroots community, accidental effort. And it turned into a nonprofit for a long time until finally we couldn't quite keep the momentum going as everybody became gainfully employed, and sort of handed over the mantle to another arts organization that had started in the same town, oddly. So, but yeah, it was a really nice time because you got in touch with a lot of local artists. You met a lot of people in the community because New England isn't known for its warm, welcoming atmosphere. Ordinarily people warm to you slowly, but you got to meet lots of people you wouldn't otherwise run into in town that you found had an interest in the arts, and so a lot of friendships and several marriages came out of the association that grew out of that gallery. So it was really a nice time.
You got a lot of good outcomes of that experience.
Yeah, I got my own work there too. So you had kind of a ready outlet for that kind of stuff.
Nice. But your box of surprises, you feel that's something that has been happening through your whole career, like impact on your professional life as well? Because you have done so many different roles, and it's not a common thing to see in our industry.
Yeah, like accidentally falling into something that you end up devoting a decade to. Yeah. So a little mix of both, because in the early 90s, when I came back east, the country was in a recession and there really were no jobs in architecture where I'd mostly been working. And I ended up going into construction for 3 years, and working for a millwork house in Albany. And in the course of that, because I had worked in CAD for a long time at that point, actually, I helped digitize that company, and was one of the reasons they hired me. So, I had to do, all the equipment picking and computer configuration. And basically, while I was managing millwork jobs, I was also, the for the first time, the IT department, so-called. I really liked it. And what ended up happening is we did a job for a company called EYP, and I sort of mentioned to the architect that we were working with, I was like, I'm really kind of in architecture, would really like to come back. And when I finally did go to work for EYP, I talked to an old friend of mine, an architect I had worked for years before, and I said, well, look, this company is big enough that I'm going to support a transition out of architecture and onto the technology side if I want to do it. And he said, how many architects do you think they have at this company? And I said, I think it's about 100. And he said, how many IT people? And I was like, maybe 10. And he said, there's your relative value. And so and he said, but, do you enjoy it? And I was like, yeah, I really enjoy it. And he said, it should be easy then. And so I ended up working as an architect for the firm, but within a year I had transitioned over to IT. And so a little bit of a conscious choice, a little bit of a kind of a little bit of a falling into necessity by way of need to get the job done with technology, and then end up kind of going with it. So I think that's kind of been the course of my career, is sort of, because when I got bored at that company finally, because the same problems kept coming up, I noticed, I was talking to a friend of mine and I said, this other job I'm considering could be a good stepping stone to Autodesk. And she said, well, if you want to work for Autodesk, why don't you apply to Autodesk? And I did. There was a position open on the Revit team. So I did that night. And then the next day, a good friend of mine at the, on the large firm roundtable, whose meeting I was at, said to me, Anthony, I was just thinking last night, have you thought about working for Autodesk? Because, I was talking to everybody about I'm sick of leaving, and I said, funny you should say that. I just applied last night, and so it was a different set of problems. But, one of the things that I really wanted to address was collaboration using Revit. because it was such a problem I had as an IT director, and I realized I couldn't actually solve it from outside Autodesk. And so because of that, the world got Revit Server and then collaboration for Revit, which I understand is a very successful business for Autodesk now. But it was really about, being in the trenches, seeing a problem, figuring out how to solve it, realizing there was no way to solve it from outside the place that was generating the problem. So it all kind of came together in that way. So, small choices for, smaller aims lead into kind of larger effects that, you can't predict.
Yeah, but first of all, thanks for collaboration for Revit, or I don't know, B360, I don't know how they call it nowadays, but
I lost 3 names ago.
I bet you were the most important person during the pandemic. Like most architects, the only way they could work was from their houses, from their homes, and having collaboration for Revit was really important. It also amazed me that like everybody thinks that if you get a job at Autodesk, or if you start a startup, or whatever you do, is just a matter of luck, and it might be just a little bit of that, but you have to be ready, and you have to have the guts to like change completely what you're doing. I feel it's something that you don't see really often. It's really easy to say it, but when the opportunity knocks your door, it's not always easy. Like it's never an easy choice, I guess.
And it's also not always obvious what is an opportunity, and you never really know if you pass one by, whether it was. My wife and I have this debate all the time. I mostly say, it's 90% luck, and she says, you make your luck. So, I think there is, the best expression around this is fortune favors the prepared mind, so, look, a lot of it's luck. So you could be somewhere else. You could say the wrong thing at the wrong time or not talk to the right person. But
yeah, no, absolutely. But I feel you can say it more like if you, I don't know, you have a successful career at Autodesk. Now it's easy because you have already done it. But at that point, or even if you success on your startup, it's easy to say after you have suffered for so many years and struggled with it. It's easy to say it afterwards, I feel. How do you, I'm just curious, like you have been through many different phases on implementations, on technology, on the industry, right? Like you did the CAD phase, the BIM phase, and now it's the generative design, AI, computational design. I don't know how you want to call it. How do you think of what is happening nowadays with the current phase of different technologies related with generative design or AI that are being implemented in our industry?
I think a lot of the expectations are extremely premature. There's some interesting work being done around generative AI. And to be clear, we're not really doing that, although we've done some AI projects. I think there's a tendency right now to label everything AI. We're working with one firm right now on a new product that they have early access to, and one of our testers said, "Oh, I see you have AI corridors." When it has nothing to do with artificial intelligence at all. But we're increasingly thinking we're losing the rhetorical battle on this, and that everything that is traditionally computational is going to be referred to as AI going forward. But one interesting experience we had with a customer is they're working on. I think I could say this without sharing too much. They're working on a computational layout idea for feasibility studies on the Hypar platform. And the developer, who is very, very experienced, who leads the team, said, I really want to try a generative algorithm on this, and I'm going to use a genetic procedure on it. And we were like, we've tried that, and we weren't ever really happy with the results finally. And he was like, I want to try it anyway. Now, being a very good developer, he banged out something in a few days to try it out. And he said, so I did this. And then I did, as you guys recommended, a procedural approach. And I found if everything was tuned just right, I'd get a really good result out of the genetic algorithm, and I'd always get a good result out of the procedural. So I think, when I talk to firms, because I get asked a lot about, can we do an AI approach? What do you think about AI? I say, it is a set of techniques that are well applied to certain types of problems, and they should be applied there. It is not necessarily the technique to apply to every single problem you have. And the assessment of that really is the key, I think, consultative moment. And if you have, the best interests of your client at heart, you advise them to the best solution, not toward the trendy solution, which honestly has yet to really prove itself out as truly helpful. So, for example, one thing that's starting to come up in something that appears like manifestly useful is Copilot in developing code, right? So it starts suggesting code, and our developers use it, right? So they'll take the suggestions from Copilot, but you start hearing from the security people that all the security vulnerabilities that are embedded in the existing code base are now starting to get replicated by Copilot into new code. So, the thing is about AI, it's wondrous, but it is an old dog that can't learn new tricks unless there's a continuous loop back into the model to educate it. So, I haven't seen that successful feedback loop happen yet. Because we're seeing kind of in ChatGPT, we're seeing generations of model. We're not just sort of seeing here's ChatGPT, and it's just learning and learning and learning and learning all the time. There's still regimented training going off over here, and then it's sort of take the person out of doing work and send them off to college for 4 years to come back and do another thing. So I'm, unlike perhaps many technologists in the industry with one axe to grind or another, I remain fairly skeptical on meaningful contribution of AI beyond some basic trivial stuff.
Yeah, I guess I kind of feel the same way. I feel that it for sure it's not going to be something that you're going to apply to everything from one day to the other, and it's going to change the industry completely. It's just going to be small steps on a specific actions or automations that you need to do. I've never ever seen 3D. I think they have been speaking about AI automatically modeling anything in 3D, or just send them a picture and it automatically models detail building, parametric building. Never seen that. Many companies have been saying that they do it. Many of them have been doing it manually behind the scenes and not using AI. But I also, last week, I was part of a hackathon, and there was these two students, and they were using the model Cloud 3. And they wanted to do a code checker, like a lot of companies are trying to do now. Yeah. And I was surprised. They just did two actions. They uploaded the construction code, and they uploaded an image of the blueprints. And I was amazed the detail on the stuff that was right, the stuff that was wrong, and how to fix it. And for me, it was gosh, this is amazing. It only takes it. And then I started thinking it only takes 2D, not 3D, and not only validates like everything on the model. So I guess it's going to be like Copilot. It's going to be a really smart assistant that it is going to get small improves, and start learning more and more, but it's not going to be from one day to the other.
Yeah, I've been sitting on a couple of AI panels over the past year, and I'm known for saying, it's the fastest, dumbest intern you will ever have, because the attitude toward it is very much the same as you would have, to an intern, not disparaging interns, but when you're first starting out, what do you have? There's somebody senior who's looking over your shoulder and checking your work because somebody else's stamp, not the interns, is going on the drawings, and it's got to be okay, right? So I think it's sort of a tautology, but it'll help where it helps, and I think my hope is that the fixation on the technique for delivering answers will not eclipse the quality of the answer, because eventually, I really don't much care what kind of spark plugs are in my car, unless I'm really tuning my car. I just care that they sort of work, and whether it actually uses fuel injection or is more traditional internal combustion engine. I'm really just trying to get to work. So these kind of details, as long as they work, don't really bother me. And I think the more these techniques just sort of sink out of sight as just being how things get done in the best way, I think the better it is for everybody. We're in that stage right now in the industry where, I'm old enough to remember where we needed to BIM up a project, and now we need to AI up a project. Like, let's get some AI in this project. And it's like, well, for what? Let's start with the goal and work backward. So, one example of Hypar's work, which was really driven, by the result and ended up being an AI project, was we did some work with Obayashi, and who also had been talking with the Stanford Research Institute, and all three of us got together, and they had an idea that when they presented a proposed office tower in Tokyo to the regulatory authorities, they wanted to be able to show how it would fit in well. And their idea about how to do that was, we want to go to the neighborhood and take a bunch of pictures of buildings in the area, and then be able to produce the facade from those photographs. How would we do that, right? And that's an obviously machine learning problem. And at first, the proposal from SRI was, well, what if we just kind of, paste the photograph on the side of the building? And we said, that's really boring. Let's generate a real 3D facade that can be quantified, right? And that's what we did over a few months. And we generated the training data for that. So we generated, hundreds of thousands of facades automatically. So it could start to understand the difference between the window and the spantle and the verticals and blah, 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 right? And, it works pretty nice. And it was solving a real problem that you probably couldn't solve any other way other than doing, that sort of imagery manipulation, perhaps, without machine learning. But it started out with a goal and worked backward to the technique. And so I think if the industry would sort of settle on goals, and I think, code compliance is a nice one, actually, to think about. And perhaps invest in. Shout out to our friends over at Upcodes. But I think that's interesting. So it takes me back to the first time I touched Revit 1.0, way back when, whatever that year was. And I remember thinking, and I put this into the introduction in Revit, Mastering Revit 2012, I think. That I was asked to write about how, I thought when I was first laying out my first walls, and then I said, someday this thing is going to tell me when I'm violating code. It's like one of my first thoughts, and hasn't to this day because it's a very, very hard problem, as Google demonstrated through Flux when they made their turn into code compliance and realized that code is, at least 50% interpretation. So, but I think there's lots of potential, but I'm here to undersell the impact of let's say immediate impact of AI on the professions, not oversell it. I think it will become a routine technique behind the scenes when it's appropriate, and everyone will stop talking about it as soon as it does.
Yeah, I feel that like a lot of things are happening. We were just speaking about the NVIDIA CEO saying that like artificial general intelligence is going to happen in 5 years, which it's a lot to say. Like they were saying last year, they were saying it was going to take 50 or 100 years, and now suddenly it's going to take 5. I'm like you. I'm a little bit skeptical on that. I do.
Beyond skeptical.
Yeah. Like I know you wanna sell more chips and.
I'll just say, show me a self-driving train, not even a car. And there is one in the Denver airport and a couple of other airports. There's no humans running those machines. They're not running with AI. They work perfectly, but just show me something that is a tightly constrained problem where it's as successful as a human all the time. And, I know there's a lot of folks who are really in love with the idea of the self-driving car and everything. So I think statistically, there are some proposals that they're safer. I think what they present is a different set of failures than humans have. We can all cite the various horror stories we've heard about them, so I won't delve in. But the thing is, as we were talking about, earlier, 16-year-olds can drive cars. 40-year-olds are considered mature in the architectural profession, and AI still can't drive a car to our satisfaction. So now we're saying in 5 years, we're going to reach parity with human capability after 100 years of investment as opposed to billions of years of evolution. Well, yeah, I'm not bullish.
Yeah, no, I agree on that. But I feel that the only worry I have is younger generations, because if you're a senior architect or a senior engineer or whatever, if something is being produced is right or wrong. But if you're as soon as you get out of college and you start working and using AI for, let's say, code validation, and you always lean on AI to solve that, how do you know if it's right or wrong? You get me? It's like I feel it's going to be hard for younger generations to. You don't know what you don't know. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, recommendation for listeners: Sherry Turkle's Simulation and Its Discontents. She is a scholar at MIT that when she joined in 1983, she immediately started a sociological study of the introduction of computation into the curriculum. And I believe the study goes on to this day. And one of the things that she pointed out was the first generation of computation in the courses, the instructors and the students were all working on simulations together. The second generation that came through the school, the instructors were appalled that the students would just take the results at face value without interrogating the methodology of the simulation. And it forced a lot of soul searching on how they would structure the curriculum to understand that you have to open up the hood and agree with the assumptions and approaches in your simulation before you trust it, which is the engineering approach, right? There's not a structural engineer on earth who hasn't interrogated one of the commercial applications to predict, structural performance until they're satisfied that it agrees with the spreadsheet that they wrote, right? And once they're satisfied, it's fine. But still people will use different packages, whether they're doing concrete or steel, because, they're better in those specialties. Right. So I think the fear is well founded that there will be too much trust. The real nightmare scenario, if you extrapolate it out far enough, is that code compliance is asserted by an AI, which is also a similar AI to what is reviewing code compliance. And we end up with bad buildings that have been approved as compliant, but actually are not. So I think, there's a lot of things you can spin out here that look ugly, but the positive side of all of this, because I feel like I'm being too negative, but there actually are a lot of positives. One of the things that I thought was exciting about Revit, that I find exciting about what we're doing in Hypar and our various colleagues who are trying to do some sort of generative procedural thing with architecture, is the possibility for later generations just to see more architecture faster. Also couple that up with performance metrics that are, trustable, let us say, and to understand what a good design looks like earlier in their career. Because, as a building professional, especially as an architect who have to manage lots of pieces of the project for a long time, by the time you're 40, maybe you've worked on 6-7 big projects. If you're not one of the people that has to bounce around, like you actually follow a project all the way through. So, okay, you've seen 7 projects. And sure, probably several million problems, like in the course of that time, that have been solved. But, what if you could see an order of magnitude of, greater predictions of how buildings operate successfully over time for whatever they're asked to do? How much better, how much quicker, how much deeper could your education be on how to do the right thing? And there's a little hint of this that I ran into years ago. I was talking with an architect in a firm in Boston, and they have been using Revit for a few years. And he said, our young architects get a better sense of space faster now than I ever expected them to have. Like, when we were working with 2D, it took us a number of years to build up the mapping onto a spatial understanding. And but with modeling, they have a much quicker understanding of the effects on space and the occupant's experience than we ever did. Right? That was his claim in watching, young people take up modeling. This is probably close to 20 years ago. Right? So I think there's an opportunity here for the fast delivery of accurate information, right, that follows the implications of a decision, to educate building professionals faster so that they make better decisions going forward. So that I find is the interesting part, right? How much can the technology make us not do what we do, but make us better at what we do sooner?
Well, for sure we'll see the results in 20 years, but I feel we already are speeding up on stuff that used to take us too much time. And I feel that we used to waste a lot of time in stuff that was not adding value. Like we said, stuff that an intern could do. And most of our time was used for that. So now I feel that we're going to become more younger generations are going to become professionals that add much more value to the industry than what we used to do. Because we used to waste our time in manual stuff or stuff that was not actually like adding complete or whole value to the project. So I'm just curious how it's going to evolve over time, for sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the first time in over 20 years we're rethinking, how decisions on projects get made and how they get delivered, right? And so I think it's certainly interesting. I think a lot of the concerns about professional practice right now are probably triggered by technological innovation, are probably quite overblown. But the Bible of Hypar, if there is one, is a book called The Future of the Professions by the Suskins, father and son team sociologists, and they predict that professions, and they looked at 4 in the book: medicine, accounting, architecture, and law. And they said that the professions are going to look radically different within 40 years, so 2 generations. And their point that they open the book with is the professions, if you understand them as certain rights and privileges granted to a group of people who are preserving, extending, and conveying a body of human knowledge, have utterly failed society, because there's an application of that expertise to a certain high economic stratum in society. And it's not like there's a gradation that you just get a worse and worse doctor. You either get medicine or you don't get it at all. At least here in America, right? So you either have a lawyer or you can't afford a lawyer, and one will be appointed for you. And there's all this kind of dichotomy of what the profession delivers. Like, you don't get an architect, you get your brother-in-law. And so the point is what's happening is that technology is trying to fill this demand gap for professional expertise below the point where most people can afford it, right? So the delivery method, the delivery method of professional expertise, in their view, is broken, because it's supposed to be delivering the benefits of this body of knowledge to the whole of society, and it's delivering it to only a tiny fraction of society. Their prediction is technology starts to close the gap. You get things like Rocket Lawyer and WebMD and, all these things that people use in lieu of actual professional interaction. And they think that therefore the practice of these professions is going to fundamentally change somehow, although they don't really get into they're not futurists necessarily, right? So they're not really getting into the shape of the world to come, but they are pointing at the inflection point that not so much technological pressure as societal pressure is forcing these changes.
Well, it can get philosophical very quickly, but I also feel that we always end up analyzing the progress of society wrong, because we end up always analyzing our current progress or taking just a lapse of 10 years or 20 years when you should take 100, 1,000 years and see how technology is it's always doing the same thing. It's a discussion I always have with people that they say there's more poverty or there are more wars, and we have never been in a point of history that it's more peaceful or less people are dying because of wars and less people are dying because of poverty. And news are not as happy as we all want, but numbers say the contrary to that. And I feel that it's 1,000 years ago, it was hard to have a horse, or 100 years ago, it was so expensive to have a car. Nowadays, everybody have cars. I remember 20 years ago, having a cell phone was really expensive. It was you should work at Wall Street or something to own a cell phone. Nowadays, even kids have cell phones. So I see a bright future, and I agree with you on that. Technology is closing the gap. Even when there are things happening that we don't like with technology, that But that's life, right? There's always a good and bad in everything. But aside from the philosophical, you have spoken so much about Hypar and the laws and the stuff you do, and we all know you have some of the brightest minds in the industry in your company. So it's true. We all know it. I would love to hear what are you currently doing at Hypar and what the future lies for you.
Yeah, well, right now, we're engaged in, speaking of philosophy, a little bit of a philosophical pivot within Hypar, because what people have used up to now, it's a highly technical product that's very oriented to highly technical practitioners, right? And we heard pretty steadily a lot, like, love the product, kind of hard to learn and use, right? So we've taken the radical step of actually building a different application on top of Hypar, which is being used on at least one or two projects right now with a couple of partner firms. And its entire approach is predicated on being able to pick it up in a couple of minutes and accomplish something meaningful. And so, in contrast to our previous approaches, which is pile on, capability upon capability ad infinitum, we're actually looking in this application at a very narrow set of capabilities that are very, very curated. And so, the best moment so far that I've had in the, I think to date, 64 user tests over the last couple of months, was I had someone who was, to my surprise, a nurse practitioner working for a firm, not a designer. She was basically a full-time consultant inside the firm for their healthcare projects. And in 5 minutes, I had her designing an outpatient clinic. And she said, I will come back and test this as many times as you want. Because she said, this is the first time that I can explain to the architects what I need. So remember, she has no expertise, right? So she's just going to hand wave at them about, no, you can't do that because this and this and this. And suddenly she could show them, right? And that is what I think is the most interesting thing, that all this stuff going on with computation is promising, right? And you see it in people using Midjourney and ChatGPT, the possibility to open the floodgates of human expression because the tools are sufficient so people can express what they feel and what they think in a way that other people can understand if it's temporarily beyond their powers because they're just starting to do this. I think that's just wondrous, right? And so, what are we concentrating on? We're concentrating on a way to bring that technology to everyone, not just the expert practitioner, because there are thousands of applications of building knowledge that need not and do not involve a professional currently. So we hear things from institutional owners. They're like, look, we don't want to use technology to get rid of our architects. We like our architects. We love working with them. But sometimes you have to decide this afternoon which landlord you're going to call of 5 possible properties that you could fit into. And you can't wait for a full board design. You need to have a quick idea of, would we even fit in this space in some sensible way? And it's answering questions like that and giving people confidence who aren't experts, right, in that they're making the right decision. I think that's a terrific benefit to the building industry, because I think everybody benefits by having a smarter team, even if their deep expertise is in disparate areas, right? So the more everybody can understand each other and where they're coming from, I think you get to our motto, better decisions faster, right? But It's all about being able to express the concern, the direction, the vision to someone else in a way they can understand. And so that's really what we're concentrating on, is trying to make those kind of tools first in space planning, and then, beyond that, being able to express these aims and ideas in a rapid way to facilitate communication and then decisions.
It's like we're just speaking about you're closing the gap. You're closing the gap between people, and that's like technical people and non-technical people. And it's communication, which is the biggest problems of all projects. So that's amazing. But you're starting with healthcare, right? But like, are you planning on also doing all the type of buildings, or what's the roadmap?
So we picked healthcare for a couple of reasons. One, the demand is very high. Two, it's very complicated. And at least so far, other than perhaps factory process design, everyone has asserted that, yes, healthcare is the most complicated thing you can do. In fact, I talked with a professional who's done healthcare in the past and data centers now, and he just started laughing when I asked about the comparative complexity of the two. And he's like, oh no, healthcare is so much more complicated than what we do in data centers, So, which, people kind of hold that up as like this incredibly complex machine, but healthcare is a really, really complicated machine. So, in any case, one of the other reasons we picked it is because it's complicated, right? And so, if you can support it in some credible fashion, you can probably bleed out into other sectors as well to help make decisions there. And so, a lot of what we're focused on is this sort of honing the ideas against the whetstone of satisfying healthcare needs, but we expect it can quickly apply to other sectors. And my hope, I won't go as far as say my expectation, but my hope is that especially in firms that are multi-sector firms, that people will start, misusing what they get from us into other sectors, and then start telling us, what they need. And the same thing happened in years ago in Revit. Like, we made a very conscious decision as a company that Revit is not for construction. It's for design, right? And within about 9 months of that stance, a lot of construction firms started coming to Autodesk and saying, look, we really love Revit, but if you guys are going to support construction, you got to do A, B, C, and D. And when we all said, using it for construction? So it led to a lot of, kind of construction-oriented projects. Your opinion may be high or low of those projects, but the point is, people will see the opportunity in a tool and carry it into their work. As we've seen when we talk to healthcare planners who are basically using a wide variety of tools to try to make their decisions, all of which are unsuited for the task. So, but there's nothing against these tools, right? They're just designed as generic tools to support lots of different tasks, and necessarily when they get applied to something that's sort of on the fringes of their capabilities, they're being misused, right? But misused in terms of you've got nothing else to use. So,
yeah, it's like Excel. Like, you can do everything in Excel, but
using
the best tool. Yeah, I've seen people drawing in Excel. So, like,
I know people who made drawings and submitted them out of Excel.
I never seen something like that,
but it's what they know and what they'll use, right? And so the moment you bring them something that, like, hey, what if you didn't have to do drawings in Excel? They get very interested because, like, oh, something oriented to what I actually do. that's always a fascinating conversation for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Anthony, I don't want to take more of your time because I know you're a busy person. You're all the time doing new stuff, so I bet you're really busy. But before we wrap up, can I ask you a couple of ping-pong questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's start with the first one. Can you tell me the best AEC software ever?
Wait, no one's gonna like me saying this. AutoCAD.
What?
Yeah.
No judging here.
It's ping pong, so I can't explain why.
Yeah. No, man, I'm not gonna judge. So, what's the next big trend in AEC?
Predictive AI.
Interesting. If you could collaborate with any person in history on any type of project, which person would you choose?
I had to settle on a choice of two. Dorothy Parker or Oscar Wilde.
Well, I would you on the Oscar Wilde. So what's your favorite building in the world, and have you ever visited?
The Pantheon in Rome, twice.
Twice.
Oh.
You really love it.
I really do.
It's impressive. It's impressive. Been there too, and it's impressive.
That Oculus gets me every time.
Yeah. The time I went, it was raining, and that's even more crazy.
And it like that cascade of water coming down into the center of the church is just amazing. Yeah,
just insane. Okay, man. Thanks very much for this insightful, philosophical, and technological talk. Can you tell the audience where they can know more about Hypar and contact you as well?
Yeah, sure. Hypar, Hypar .io is our website. There's a lot of stuff on there to learn about it. And the typical email at Hypar is first name at hypar.io. So, and you find on LinkedIn under Anthony Hauck, no special numbers or anything attached to it. I look forward to hearing from folks.
Yeah, it was great. I hope you have a great day.
Yeah, thanks so much for the time. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thanks to our listeners. If you like this content, you can find past and upcoming episodes in ascworks.everse.com and at all of our Everse social media. We'd love to hear from you and recommendations for new content, so leave us a DM and we'll make sure to catch you.